everybody. It's a true privilege to welcome on the show Mr. Luke Gazdic. I think it doesn't really give you or do you much favor and honor saying former NHL player. Yeah, Luke used to play a lot of hockey, and he's a sportscaster these days. So welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
As a kid, because where I'm from back home in the Czech Republic, hockey is as much a religion as it is here in Canada. Or perhaps the rung right below the Canadian level. To be fair, I still love ice skating and I love the game. So as a kid, I did. I'm ready to admit it. Of being a professional hockey player, but unlike me, you actually did it. You achieved it, just a few numbers, 147 games in the NHL with the Oilers, and we will come on to talk about the Oilers and especially tonight's game and potentially beyond. And the Devils, you've also played countless games with the AHL's OC Barons, Bakersfield Condors, Albany Devils, Stockton Heat, and the San Diego Gulls. There's a whole list. So, and we will also talk about your first NHL goal in a second, but if you were, finally the question, if you were to pick a couple of other highlights of your career, what would they be?
Well, I'll go backtrack then. The first goal is obviously there, but we'll get there. I would say first and foremost, getting drafted to the NHL was a pretty special compliment for me. I was a local here in Toronto. I grew up in North York. I was never the best player or top of my draft class, anything like that. I was drafted 9th round to the OHL and didn't think much of getting drafted to the NHL. I only talked to one team before the draft, and it was the Dallas Stars 2 nights before the draft. The draft was on Friday night for the first round and Saturday, and I ended up getting drafted in the 6th round to the Dallas Stars, which was a really cool accomplishment, something I never thought that that would happen. And from there, I started my pro career. But I would think there was just a lot of work that went up basically to when I started playing hockey at the age of 3 here until 17 years old. And hearing your name called at the NHL draft was a pretty special accomplishment.
Now I can imagine. So the Stars drafted you, but if I remember correctly, you never played for them.
No.
So what's that like? Because from what I've read, a lot of hockey players would tend to have their bags packed and they're ready to be traded.
Well, that's kind of how I thought it was going to go. You get drafted by a certain NHL team, and I think you automatically think you're going to spend your entire career there. So I got drafted by the Dallas Stars in the 6th round, 172nd overall. I turned pro when I was 19. I went to the East Coast Hockey League, which if anyone knows about the East Coast Hockey League, it's 2 rings below the NHL. We call it the jungle for a reason. It's tough down there. So I got my start there. And from there, you get invited to main camps. And the next fall, I'm at NHL camp with Mike Modano and Sean Avery and Sergei Zubov and Captain Brendan Morrow and Jamie Benn, all these guys, young players and old players. And from there, I started my pro career. I got sent down to the AHL, which is what happens for young players. I ended up in the American Hockey League with the Texas Stars in Austin, Texas. So here I am, 19-year-old kid. I got in my truck, I packed all my clothes and drove from Toronto to Austin, 28 hours, moved away from home and started my pro career. And ultimately, you're hoping to get called up to the big club. You play well enough in the minors, someone goes down up top, they pick up the phone and say, who's playing well down there? And they call someone up. And I ended up being down there for 4 years without being called up. I played 276 games in the AHL without being called up. So from there, I go to my 5th professional training camp with the Dallas Stars, and I thought I had an outstanding camp. Probably the best shape I've been in my life. And so I go to camp, and the very last game of an NHL training camp, the very last game, the team usually plays its roster. Like who is going to make the team is the very last game. If you ever watch the Leafs, next time you watch the Leafs next year, or whoever your team is, the very last preseason game is as close to the starting roster as possible. So I'm playing in that game. I'm the 4th line left wing, and I actually scored that night. I tried to mix it up, got some scraps, and ultimately I didn't make the team again. So 5 years in a row. So I'm devastated. I drive down to Austin, and at 12:01 the next morning, sorry, I'll back up. Once you get cut from a hockey team, you go through a process called waivers, where every other team in the league, all 31 teams, have a choice to pick up the phone and say, we want to claim him, and they can do it for free. So I woke up the next morning at 12:01 to a call from Craig McTavish, the Edmonton Oilers, and he said, we just picked you up. Get your bags packed. You're coming up to Edmonton. You're going to play in your first NHL game, Hockey Night in Canada, on Tuesday night at home versus the Winnipeg Jets. So packed my stuff, packed one carry-on. I flew from Austin to Edmonton, and the next night I was playing in my first NHL game.
And well, it's a nice segue to my next question.
There you go.
Sorry to cut across. We're talking hockey royalty here, aren't we? Zubov, Modano, Craig McTavish, the last NHL player without a helmet, if I remember correctly. So from the scorching heat of Austin, Texas, all the way up to Edmonton, Alberta. And what did happen? It was the 1st of October, 2013, against my fellow Czech goalie, Mr. Ondřej Pavelec, to his shame, 2 minutes and 21 seconds into the game.
So, I mean, I didn't even know if I was going to be playing that night, first of all. I was so nervous. I remember you said going from the scorching heat to Edmonton. It was snowing the first day there, October 1st. I couldn't believe it. I went from 35-degree weather in Austin. But they told me in the morning I was playing, so my mom flew out, my brother, my sister. I step on the ice for this game. My very first shift, we get a quick icing. So after an icing, you go to the offensive zone. We do a little set play. My centerman wins it right behind me. I spin around the circle. I throw a puck on net, and it goes in. So 14 seconds into my very first shift in the NHL, on my first shot, I scored my first goal. And I found out after the period, I had an interview with CBC, that it was an NHL record. So Mario Lemieux was the fastest player to score in his first NHL game 15 seconds into his first shift, and I beat that record 14 seconds into my first shift.
Woo! Boom. Who cares about Lemieux if you can have Luke Gazdic? So at that point, are you thinking, after all those years down south in Texas, it's going to be easy from now onwards?
Yeah, I certainly did. I make the joke that I think it took me 54 games to score my second goal. So, but I just knew that I had to continue to work, not even in that game, but in the season. I ended up fighting in the second period because basically what they tell you on waivers is you have 30 days with this new club. And then after 30 days, they make a decision if they want to keep you long term or if they want to either put you back to the minors, send you back to your original club. So I knew I had about 30 days to show what I could do. And from there, I just started. I started grinding just like I had my entire career. But certainly 275 games in the minors before that point. So it was very gratifying to be able to stay on with the Oilers long term. I was there ended up being there for 3 years.
Amazing. And as you've said, your family were there for you and for your very first game. And I suppose it's sort of a pattern here in Canada, isn't it? Because you hail from a hockey family. So your father, Mike, was drafted by the good old Sabres in the 78 NHL draft. Your brothers play hockey. So did your father serve as your main inspiration? Or is it just something here in the water and this is what you guys do? Because that's what you do. You play hockey and you love it, and for a very good reason.
I think it was mostly my brother. My brother's 2 years older than me. So as soon as basically he could walk, he had a pair of skates on. And my dad, God bless him, you talk about growing up in Canada and being a prototypical hockey family. We had about a, 30 by 20 backyard that he used to flood. So 2x4s all down the side, plywood in the back, and it would get cold enough at night where he'd fill up garbage pails and freeze the grass. So we had a hockey rink in our backyard, and me and my brother would be out there every single night, and I just wanted to be like my brother and like my dad. And then once I was kind of old enough, I'll say 4 or 5, to realize my dad got drafted. He ended up being my hero. So I was just on that rink every single day. We used to, the green garbage bag, the green garbage bin that my dad used to flood the rink, we called that the Stanley Cup, and me and my brothers would play for that. It was about as prototypical as you could get. I can tell this now because I'm older, I used to fake the sniffles and fake sick so I could stay home and skate on the rink all day. My earliest memories of watching hockey were the Toronto Maple Leafs at Maple Leaf Gardens. Wendell Clark was probably my favorite player the first time I turned on a game or went down to Maple Leaf Gardens. If anyone knows Wendell Clark, he's one of the first players you're going to notice in a game, whether it's for a big goal or a big hit or a big fight. Those teams in the late 90s, Doug Gilmour was another favorite of mine, and then into the early 2000s with Gary Roberts and Darcy Tucker and Shane Corson and Ty Domi, Brian McCabe, all these guys. So growing up here, it was usually Wendell Clark, but any member of the Leafs, I'd say.
I'm going off tangent slightly, but comparing hockey with the likes of soccer. No, hockey is up there, whereas the soccer players, they don't even know what they're doing.
A little more
diving,
physical, hey?
No, at the same time, hockey's going, or has gone lately, through a massive evolution. Now, you watch any game, be it here, in Canada, the States, even in Europe these days, those players seem to be flying up and down the ring. So do you think that this feature of all these, let's call it robotic skating even, flying up and down the rink, as I called it. Will that continue marking the game for many years to come, or is there yet another evolutionary twist in the thing? Where's the game going?
Interesting question. I think right now, the game is the best it's ever been. The players that are coming into the league now are 18 years old, and they are ready to play as soon as they enter the league. For me, when I was 18, drafted by Dallas, it took me 2 years before I even got invited to the main camp. Now these guys are 17, and they are ready to go. They are essentially robots, most of them. They eat, drink, sleep, hockey. But the game has changed a lot. And I'll get to my broadcasting analyzing career now. All I do is watch hockey now. I study hockey, I watch games, I clip games. When I entered the league in the minors in 2009, it was a lot more physical, it was a lot tougher. There were designated tough guys or fighters, if you want to call them. I was generally one of those guys. As a young player, I didn't love doing it, but I was good at it, so I continued to do it. But there were 2 or 3 of those on each team. And the game was a lot slower, and we call it heavy. Heavy is an adjective how we use to kind of describe hockey as it was heavy. Everyone was looking for size. General managers were looking for big defensemen. They were looking for big goaltenders. The small, skilled player was getting pushed out of the game, where now you see it's kind of come back. The rules changed in 2014 after the lockout, where there was less obstruction. There's more ability for players to skate. So all these general managers now started coveting these small, skilled, fast players. And I don't want to say that pushed me out of the game. It probably had a hand in it, but all the players coming up now are skilled and fast and, most importantly, creative. You're seeing these players now try things in games. I mean, I saw it in practice, but now they're confident enough to try it in games. The move that I guess is probably the most famous right now is called this Michigan, where players are picking up the puck on their stick and going around the net. Instead of wrapping the puck around on the ice like I would, they're picking it up on their stick and they're, putting it right into the top shelf, and they have the confidence and creativity to try that during a game. It's unbelievable. I just think right now, do I wish it was a little tougher, a little heavier, a little harder? Sometimes, yes, but the skill cannot be denied. On a nightly basis, especially now in the Stanley Cup, when you have the 2 best teams left in hockey, it is some of the best hockey that I have ever watched, and I think the game is in a very good place.
Talking of Michigans, let's model a hypothetical scenario, and it just shot through my head. I would love to get your take on it. Scotty Stevens and his peak versus Connor Bedard. Who do you think will kill whom? Would Connor just dig him out and skate away, or would good old Scott do what he was very famous for?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Now, I don't want to say older players, but the veterans of the game, the Scott Stevenses, probably wouldn't like to hear this, but the players that are coming up now are more skilled than ever. You guys have heard me say that a couple times now, but they also are learning the hockey sense in real time. Connor Bedard had a play this year where he cut across the blue line in New Jersey, and an older defenseman, Brendan Smith, stepped up and hit him. I thought it was fairly clean, but caught him pretty high. A lot of these players don't feel any repercussion for the stuff they do. Skating over the blue line with your head down is a no-no. I learned that from the moment I entered junior hockey, because you have defensemen that are looking to light you up and kind of teach you a lesson that You can't be staring at your skates and trying dangles. But when both their heads are up, Connor Bedard wins that battle 90 out of 100 times. The speed, the skill, the vision, the shot, if you give him even 3 feet of space to let off a shot, they're shooting the puck like I've never seen before. That's another thing too, is the technology has come so far where these sticks are so light and they have so much whip and the players can get so much velocity on them. They aren't these heavy wood sticks anymore. They shoot harder than they ever have. But the younger players are certainly learning in real time that there are still some older players in the league that are looking to, I guess, make them pay their dues, if you want to put it that way.
You can tell Luke's doing this for a living, because for the last few years off the ice, you've had a very successful sportscasting career. So you regularly feature as an analyst, and I believe that's what you might be doing tonight as well. You've also launched your own podcast called Mets Off, far more famous than my little thing. Here we had Glenn Healy here last year, which was great, and now we're having you. So I suppose the question, because I asked Glenn the same question, for you, has it been a natural transition or natural transformation from having been a player to being a sportscaster, or did you still get nerves and jitters, especially the first time you were called upon to go and do it?
Yeah.
In other words, was it easier or harder than scoring your first NHL goal on your first shift?
I mean, hockey was always harder for me, but I will say that it was nowhere near natural. I immediately, after my first segment on TV on Sportsnet, had so much more respect for anybody that goes on live TV and can even articulate a sentence. I was sitting there at my cottage about a year and a half, I don't want to say a year into my NHL retirement, a year and a half, and I got basically cold called from Sportsnet asking me if I wanted to do some Oiler intermissions. Just come in, wear a suit, you're going to watch the game, we'll go into the intermission and you talk about it. And I thought it was pretty straightforward, but by the time I got on the desk, we had about 5 minutes till showtime. So the lights come on, and I remember asking my producer, I said, is anybody going to tell me what to do or what to say? I had basically no instruction. I did not go to broadcasting courses or school. So from there, it was just me figuring it out. I knew the hockey part of it. I could watch a game and tell you what I'm seeing, but taking that and doing it on live TV is a whole different ballgame. Getting your thoughts right in real time, saying what you want to say, how you want to say it. You have a producer in your ear telling you how much time you have. You want to sound smart. You want to sound articulate. You want to have a bit of comedy sometimes. I'm pretty self-deprecating in the sense that I'm breaking down Connor Bedard and Connor McDavid and these guys, and I am nowhere near the level they are. So I have to reiterate that to people that this is stuff that I can't do, but I spend a lot of time watching them do it. So it definitely wasn't natural, but we're about 2 years into it now. And I mean, I've made it to, in my eyes, to the pinnacle. I got to be on Hockey Night in Canada this year. I got a call from my boss to do the Leafs Oilers Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night, which for any kid growing up here, the first goal is to play in it. And the second goal for me was to be on it. And I'm sitting beside Ron McLean, who I grew up with in my living room as a kid, and he's asking me questions. And this is a true story. When he threw it to me my first time, I actually paused because it just felt, it was so weird to hear him refer to me by name and then ask me a question. So I didn't necessarily stumble. Once I got into it, I was okay, but it was a bit of an adjustment. And it's awesome. Now, I'm now to the point where I try not to say I'm going to work. I say I'm going to the studio because it's a blessing to get to do what I do. And even tonight, Game 5, I'll be on in the post game where it comes back to the studio and I just get to sit there and talk about hockey and break it down. And to answer your first question, first and foremost, yes, I still get nervous. But the first time I was flipping out. My heart was beating. I was just thinking of what's everyone going to think about me, and how do I sound, and how do I look? And now I just more so just try to keep it as natural and organic as possible and just speak to what I know.
You sound and look great right here, right now, and I think it would be great for the mankind if you could instill some more humor into Connor McDavid. But I should digress again. This is a gambling or sports betting conference. Ontario has very successfully regulated its iGaming market in the last few years. So what is your take on all this? Because I suppose you get exposed to it at the very least by means of seeing adverts on TV. Good thing, bad thing, where do you stand on sports betting here in Ontario?
So it's come a long way. Obviously, since I first turned pro, it was basically non-existent or, I mean, back home here, we had ProLine and stuff like that. But now you're seeing the marketing and the advertising. And I think it has a lot of good things. First and foremost, it's bringing a lot of revenue into networks. It's bringing a lot of revenue into the league. We could see already there has been a couple problems with the players that we'll get to. It's an absolute non-negotiable. It's a big no-no for players. I was very, very adamant of that when I played. And even the commercials, on the commercial side, you can see that they've already changed. They went from almost promoting it to now promoting safe gambling. I think, I'm not trying to get too somber here, but I have seen every single iteration and variation of a teammate over my career. I've played with guys from the Czech Republic, from the US, from Finland, from Russia, from Canada, of all ages, all shapes and sizes. And addiction comes in any way. It can be anything. And I've had and know some teammates that have issues and some that don't have any at all. Watching a broadcast, to me, I think is where I hear some of the negatives. Some fans think that there's too much advertising for it. It doesn't bother me at all watching it. There's just as many commercials for whatever, whether it's alcohol or restaurants, whatever it is. It doesn't bother me. And I think it has a lot of good things, but it also has to be managed very responsibly, especially for guys that are playing the game right now.
Indeed. Let's talk about the dark side then.
Yes.
Shane Pinto springs to mind as someone who's very unfortunately slipped the slippery slope of betting, and I believe the league, as in the NHL, sent out a very strong message in his case and beyond. He actually had to sit out half of the season. And if you look also at the likes of the MLB, now they're these days dishing out, and again, it would appear for a very good reason, lifelong bans. So this demonstrates that the leagues, they have always, to your point, taken it very seriously, but they're stepping up their efforts even further. So what was your immediate reaction when the story about Shane broke? What did you think?
To be honest, I was a little disappointed. That's my honest opinion, because yes, it's bigger now, but even when I played, we still had these meetings about the do's and don'ts of being a professional hockey leaguer, and especially being in the National Hockey League. You are under a microscope, whether it's in the media and the city you're playing in. So it was disappointing to see that, I guess, that the rules were broken when it's such coaches have things for players, and coaches then have things for players called non-negotiables. So whether that's in-game, we call forechecking non-negotiable. There are certain non-negotiables off the ice, and that's carrying yourself in a positive light in the city you're playing in, and it's to not break rules like this. You just have to be extremely smart in your day-to-day. And betting on anything, whether it's hockey, football, as a professional hockey player, professional athlete, is a huge, huge no-no. So the players know that. And I can tell you from my experience that it wasn't around our team. Yeah, we had a Sunday for fun pool where we picked the winners of the football teams, you know, in game, and someone buys lunch, whatever, whoever wins. But you never cross the line into getting, now they have the apps. And I think that's where it's become so easy, is every sportsbook has an app. You can have this thing right on your phone. You can do them instantly. But as an athlete, and if you're under contract with a professional team, you got to know better. And that's kind of why I was a little disappointed in the whole situation, is because we know that going in.
And in your book, in that vein, what would be the most efficient way of important responsible gambling trainings and messages? I believe, by the way, you'd be great. Connor McDavid, and I mentioned it on the previous panel before, you arrived, as you might know, he's one of the RG adverts, and there have been and will have been others. Is that the way, or would it be more efficient for somebody to stand up in the locker room, or a retired player who would talk to his or even her peers about all this?
Well, first and foremost, I think a 41-game suspension does a pretty good job. Guys see now that is no joke. I'm pretty happy the league took that stance. You give them a fine, you give 5 or 10 games. You never know if some players are going to say, that's nothing. 41 games of your season, I don't know if it was with or without pay. I believe it was without pay. That is a major red flag to any player. But they still have conferences and segments. I would almost guarantee you that every player has either a rep or a former player that struggled with it come in before the season and address the team as a whole. Because I think the players have to know too, first and foremost, they have to be reiterated every year what the rules are, what you can and can't do. They should know, but you really have to drill it into their heads just to make sure they know what's good and what's bad. But I will tell you that a 41-game suspension would stop almost every player.
And these words of wisdom are just the perfect place to call it quits, wrap it up. So ladies and gentlemen, please put it together for the one and only on TV tonight, Mr. Luke Gazdic.
Thank you, guys.